Downtown Canton is part of the city that has preserved much of its historic character and still gives off a vibe of being a small town. There are a few shops and restaurants in downtown. There's also a park and a gazebo in the middle of downtown. Overall, the feel of this area is something that you don't really find in many other suburbs of Atlanta. Canton is in the northwest part of Metro Atlanta, and it's quite a ways from the city. If you were to live in Canton and work in Atlanta, it would be a terrible commute. I think for many people who live in Canton, they try to find work somewhere in the suburbs or somewhere in Canton, which would be far more convenient than having to regularly drive to the city. Some of the main roads that run through Canton are 575, which is like the interstate access that would allow you to get to other parts of Metro Atlanta. And then there's also Marietta Highway, which turns into Waleska Road right there around Canton. And this kind of goes right around downtown Canton. This is one of the main roads that goes through the city. This is also where you're going to find a lot of the commercial areas. While much of Metro Atlanta is marked with rolling hills and unlevel ground, it is even more emphasized or more exaggerated in Canton because Canton is so close to the North Georgia mountains. So on this channel, we often talk about not being able to find a home on flat ground. It's not very common in Metro Atlanta because of how many hills we have. Well, it's even more so in some of the areas of Canton. And part of the reason for that is because Canton is really only about 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes to the North Georgia mountains. So it is really a big benefit to be able to live in Canton and to be able to get away to the mountains so easily is one of the biggest draws for the people who live in this area. Not only that, but it's so far from Atlanta. Generally, Canton is a suburban kind of feeling city with a lot of neighborhoods and a lot of homes and HOAs, with the pools and the clubhouse and a lot of community. And then every once in a while, there's some shops and restaurants sporadically, spread out through the city. This is what Canton kind of feels like. There are a lot of young families who live in Canton, and there are a lot of older folks who live in Canton who kind of have moved away from the Atlanta area to get away from the hustle and the crowd of Atlanta, to be closer to the mountains. This is the general feel of Canton. A lot of times people ask me, like, if I live in one of the suburbs, do I need to go to Atlanta for anything? And this would certainly be a giant pain in the butt if you lived in Canton and you need to go to Atlanta. But fortunately, you don't typically need to go to Atlanta for anything if you live in the suburbs. Like if you live in a big city suburb like Marietta or Alpharetta, typically all of the things like groceries or whatever daily errands you might need to run, you can typically find in those cities. Canton, however, is a little bit different. It is a bit smaller of a city, so while you still wouldn't need to go to Atlanta, you may need to go to one of the other city suburbs to find something. If there was a specific kind of grocery store or a specific big box store or something that you wanted, you might not be able to find it in Canton, but you would be able to find it in Marietta, which is 20 minutes away, or in Woodstock, which is 20 minutes away. So I think you can begin to see that Canton really has that small town feel. It really is the kind of town that you go to get away from the crowds and to get away from the traffic. And this is what brings a lot of people to the city of Canton. Now, huge disclaimer here. I rarely, if ever, talk about politics on this channel. It's not really something that I like to talk about. In general, Metro Atlanta is mixed. Some conservative, some liberal. It's very much half and half. But Canton, you should know, is not nearly as mixed as Metro Atlanta as a whole. It's a bit more right-leaning than Metro Atlanta is. Now, I'm not saying that it's super right. I'm not saying that they are, very conservative. It's still, for the most part, kind of mixed maybe in Canton, but it is a little more right than it is left in Canton. And you can kind of expect this in some of the outlying suburbs of Metro Atlanta. One big reason why this is one of Atlanta's best suburbs is because of the amount of outdoor activities that you can find in Canton. Right through the city, there is a river called the Etowah River that runs right through, and there are lots of hiking and biking trails along the Etowah River, places for kayaking or fishing in the river. In general, the river provides a lot of nature and a lot of exploring outdoor opportunities in the city of Canton. There are also a few parks in Canton. The Etowah River Park and Heritage Park are a few of them. And when it comes to golf courses, which is very important when you're looking for a new place to live, Canton, unfortunately, doesn't have a lot of golf courses. They do have a couple, but they're certainly not known for having golf courses. One thing that Canton is very well known for is the shops at the mill, or the mill on Etowah. It's kind of called both things. This is like an old mill that has been restored to have a lot of commercial spaces, shops and restaurants, and it still has, in many parts, that mill feel. It still has the really tall stacks for like the chimneys or whatever they used in the mill. So you still see that, and the brick, is still very apparent, but they have remodeled the area to be more of a family-friendly atmosphere kind of place. They have a big green lawn there, similar to what you see in many downtown areas. They've got a big TV screen. They're regularly playing the Atlanta Braves game or the Falcons game there on the big screen, and people will go to the restaurants and eat there on the green lawn, or bring a picnic and eat there and hang out. And so the mill is really one of the highlights of the city of Canton. Also, the Etowah River runs right by the mill as well. And so this relatively new commercial area is one of the biggest draws for many people who live in Canton. One thing that I think is super important to think about if you plan on moving to Canton is that because of the location of Canton, because it's on the outskirts of the Metro Atlanta area, this is where you're finding typically the up and coming suburbs of Metro Atlanta. As more and more people move here, people tend to move to the outskirts of Metro Atlanta, farther away from Atlanta, where you can find lower home values and less of a crowd. And so the cities that are very close to Atlanta, like Sandy Springs, Vining, Norcross, these cities don't have much room for growth anymore. They're already, for the most part, developed. Home prices do appreciate there, but not as fast as the suburbs that are experiencing the most amount of growth. Canton is one of those suburbs. This is where you're going to see many people moving to get to the Metro Atlanta area, and so home prices will appreciate, in my opinion, faster in cities like Canton than they would in cities like Sandy Springs that are adjacent to the city of Atlanta. Currently, there are over 200 homes for sale in Canton, which is actually very surprising. To compare, in Alpharetta, there's only 140 homes for sale, and in Suwanee, there's only 60 homes for sale. So to see that there are 200 homes currently available in Canton shows that there is not only some new construction going on here, but there's also lots of demand for homes. So people are starting to sell their homes in this area. Of the 200 homes for sale in Canton, about 45 of them are 5 to 10 years old, and about 70 of them are 20 to 30 years old. This is actually a really common phenomenon that we see in the housing market in many of the suburbs of Atlanta. Right around 2008, during the housing market crash, there isn't a lot of new construction homes. I guess it's more like after 2008. So between 2008 and 2015, we really don't see a lot of homes built during that time period because developers were still recovering from the housing market crash. So in many of the cities, including Canton, homes tend to be built around 2015 or newer, and there are homes built well before the market crash, so around 1990s and 80s and early 2000s. As the city of Canton grows, more developers will continue to build new construction homes in the city of Canton. Okay, let's talk about the public schools in Canton. So unfortunately, the public schools here are not great according to greatschools.org. This is a website that rates the school qualities. But one of the reasons for this is that Canton is just now experiencing the growth boom. People are just now starting, in the last few years, starting to move to Canton more and more. So as Canton grows, the schools will improve as they do in all of the other suburbs of Metro Atlanta. But right now, they still have some catching up to do. Something else to keep in mind when it comes to school ratings is that a school can be rated excellent. A school can be rated a 10 out of 10, and your student or your child can have a poor teacher. Conversely, your student or child can go to a 7 out of 10 school and have an excellent teacher. So these ratings are very relative, and there's a lot of variation in what goes into these school ratings. So certainly something to think about. There are many sources for school ratings, and when you're trying to figure out which of these schools has the best ratings, it's best to look at multiple sources. And so Canton really has a great vibe, and there are a lot of people moving there, and homes will appreciate in price. And there are a lot of great things about Canton, but unfortunately, there are some downsides to living in Canton. There are some red flags and potential deal breakers if you're thinking about moving to Canton. If you want a full list of the pros and the cons of living in Canton, Georgia, check out this video. I'll see you there.